Hey, I was talking about the utility of beauty standards in our day-to-day life in my third video in this channel, where I laid out some of my ideas about the relationship between beauty standards and power and security. And I just want to elaborate on it a little bit more because, well, it's just things I like having in my mind at all given times, really. Okay, well, I was pondering, why do our standards of beauty even change at all? Pretty much we are all born with a generally predetermined default layout of what we should be attracted to when we are old enough to start thinking about those things. Physical health manifested as characteristics such as broad shoulders, tall height, indicating good genetic inheritance, alongside a balanced length on our extremities, from head to toe, left to right arms, 10 to 30% of body fat and toned muscles indicating strength, alongside a well-defined jawline, symmetrical features, a dense set of hair, a clean, smooth skin, as well as voluptuous breast and waistline in women, complemented with a clean and complete collection of teeth inside your mouth. You can't forget an acceptable level of hygiene, manifested in a freshly washed and groomed appearance. When we are speaking of overall cleanliness, that shows you that a person is technically safe to even be around at all to begin with. To even think about having a maid, you need to start by making sure it's actually safe to even be around them at all. You wouldn't want to put such a thing as a potential of conceiving a child with someone that's not even safe for you. If it's not safe for you, it's pretty much not safe for anybody, theoretically. Giving another person the chance to reproduce with you is one of the most important matters we are biologically programmed to have. We wouldn't waste that chance of conceding that power to anybody. That could change the game entirely for you. It can make or destroy you pretty much. That power is value, and that value takes you places. Safe places. Well, that's technically how it is, right? Except no. No, it's not. Somehow, everything gets complicated. If it was as simple as that, and we already have pretty much the perfect standard predetermined for us, so that we can make the decisions that are guaranteed efficiency at perpetuating the ideal future generation, an easy task and safer, and have a plentiful rest of our lives and retire and just call it a day. What makes all of that previously discussed turned into this? How do we deviate so much? And not only that, bend, twist, overly complicate, simplify, and straight up even corrupt that standard to the most extreme cases to degrees our own better instinct might even call detrimental, rejectful, harmful, ugly, destructive, gross, aberrant, embarrassing, shameful, sinful, grotesque, toxic. Remember the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it was right there. It was so easy. Why? How? Well, an easy answer is to say that it's complicated. Our biological beauty standards intertwine with all sorts of other beauty standards we develop as we grow up, such as, for example, mixing up your biological predetermined beauty standards with, I don't know, a cartoon you really liked at the same time as where you were discovering those biological beauty standards. And somehow that makes you blend both things to cope with, for example, the fact that you weren't able to satisfy those natural beauty standards with a regular person that filled up that previously established criteria, while, for example, instead, those fictional characters can satisfy whatever you need because they're in your head. You can fantasize about them, however, in whatever scenario you want it, because you have control of it, because it's in your head, and it's anything you want. And then you include beauty standards you develop over time exteriorly, such as growing up in an environment where some of the predetermined natural beauty standards are now rejected due to some political or social bias, such as, for example, muscle tone being considered associated with low working class, or women with feminine features, such as breasts or hips, are considered a symbol of masculine oppression, or having general human features being considered uh, basic, boring, because you're special. You're not a mere commoner. You're more. You're beyond. You're better. Am I explaining myself? I'm not, right? I'm not. I knew it. I'm better, you say. Yes. Technically you can say that. At the end of the day, it all sums up to achieving betterness really deep inside our brains. Our instinct to look for those beauty patterns, even though you might not be rationally aware of it, but subconsciously you are inclined to look for beauty standards in order to determine the characteristics that the future generations are going to have. Here's one example. You're a person who consciously doesn't look forward for having a child, but still wants a relationship. Well, the decision to not reproduce comes from your rational mind, depending a lot of biases you develop socially growing up. Unless the characteristics you look forward in a mate are an amorphous blob of ether with no understandable conscious or characteristics of any kind our brains can process. The characteristics you're gonna look for in a possible partner are gonna be the subconscious natural standards that are predetermining you for reproductive purposes. That's it. That's why you have them. Regardless of how you use them, that's why you have them. Regardless of how you end up implementing your own very personal bullshitty beauty standards, they are all determined by the notion of achieving something better, as we already learned previously. Something safer for us. That's where the power aspect that I mentioned previously truly comes into play. Are you still with me here? Uh, Being aware now that our beauty standards are directly linked to our reproductive instincts, regardless of how you want to rationalize it or not, in like personal, remember that, personal ways that might even reach far away from reproduction itself. We can also be aware that this means a lot of it is linked to natural selection, survival of the fittest, aka power, striving for something better, aiming to secure the future. Whoever can manage to be at the vanguard of beauty standards is gonna be on top of the social food chain. They can dictate their own personal influence to the rest of people in whatever way fits themselves. They're securing personal perpetuity for a longer time, hopefully even engineering whatever they decide comes after them when they are gone finally. And here's where you see beauty standards being implemented by the dominant class of society, mainly the higher class. Throughout ages, the dominant class doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be the higher class. Is that it's usually the higher class that is the dominant. Does that make sense? Throughout ages, we have seen that the beauty standards that have remained the dominant have been standards that showcase their high status, with examples such as a physique untampered by harsh conditions of hard manual labor, a physique that showcases you have more than enough resources to be well nourished, and excluding fashion, dogmas, and such, because those subjects can be an entire conversation on their own. You have physical features that indicate that you are a different cast from the rest, aka you are special, aka this is where we start getting into body modification, eugenics, and any kind of force bias that gets us into really, really freaky territories. And this is pretty much the main one that we have right now, actually, right now, in probably the freakiest ever. We can even go further. Somehow, consciously or unconsciously, we have been creating a steady line of social conquest throughout history, aimed to claim control of everybody under one rule, under one belief. Strangely enough, very similarly to what you see in cults. Yeah, super weird, right? I don't know how it got to this point, if it is by design or just the way things naturally end up being after a certain point. But you can read a lot about a society in the things that they find beautiful. They say a lot about who they are, where they came from, and where they are going. For example, the further back you go, you see that standards are in their more basic forms, right? But also, there is another detail. The standard of age that's considered attractive was usually younger in women, meaning when they were most fertile, and older in men, when they were most experienced and accomplished, apt, wiser, etc., 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 blah, 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 blah. Technically, we all, I mean, first of all, technically, we all know that age doesn't always translate into that, but you get the idea. That's also true to this day, and most likely will remain for a long time still. But what I mean is that the closer you get to modern age, the closer standards tend to move in age gap in both genders, making it really young in both. But not only that, fertility becomes least and least relevant into the whole equation. But weirdly enough, in an era where knowledge is supposedly at its highest ever and hyper specialization is at the most demand, the standard is younger and like dumber than ever. Younger, less experienced, and dumber than ever. I mean, let's be fair here. It's probably because you can get so overwhelmed by so much knowledge that you just bypass all of it. And because of that, their overwhelmed minds end up simply catching very little of anything and regressing back to basics pretty much. Becoming more basic than ever, but in an extremely hyper focused manner. Because that overload of information leaves you hyper stimulated, but you're not getting anything, right? So you need to pacify that stimulation, and the only resource that you have to do that is to pacify it with the things that you have instinctively, the most basic stuff, the most animalistic. The animalistic side of you just comes out by itself. You just have to not fight it, and it's just gonna run rampant. That's what I meant. That's what I was trying to explain previously. A lot of people can also call that first world problems. Nowadays, we are so hyper connected that regardless of each other's own individual status in like the global social ranks or whatever, when you are so distant from the basic natural day-to-day issues such as survival, you create new non-issues you can now struggle against or pretend to struggle against out of just sheer alienation, boredom, and lack of belonging. Your brain doesn't really know what to do, really. You instinctively need something to fight for, something to strive to. That, in this case, applied to our beauty standards. This indicates that our society is so prosperous, as weird as that sounds, judging by how it looks like, just by looking out your metaphorical mental window. Yeah, it has made us reach a point where, in our sheer alienation, we don't even know what we want anymore because we don't even know what we are anymore. And when you are so lost that you don't even know what you are anymore, you are in a desperate need for someone of something to tell you such things. And in such vulnerability, you are at risk of accepting anything pretty much. You have no ground to argue or call out something you see. You just want to fill up that void eating you inside with anything, whatever it is. That's where the cult like aspect comes in. Cults need your natural identity destroyed, your notion of the self warped, and your conscious void in order to exert all control over you, to make you into whatever they may require of you, into whatever level of power they can extract from you. And it all stems from molding what you view as beauty standards. And those beauty standards they strive for are always roughly summed up by lack of gender differentiation, control of your form, your role, your identity, a control of reproduction amongst its members, control of your fertility, reserving it only to the higher ups who can choose whoever they desire, and a brainwashing for what the members find desirable, usually summing up to the higher power of the cult dictating what the appealing standard is, which tends to be himself. And weirdly enough, usually a very ethereal and abstract, undefined idea of what beauty is. The last 2 points are entangled because in cults, the leader or leaders usually establish standards that coincidentally fits themselves as the most desirable, but strangely enough, they go further and establish what they are as something beyond human, abstract, and superior, somehow making their regular human form nothing but a mere vessel, something you should discard and forget about in order for you to accept whatever the cult itself wants you to accept. That is the ultimate power. The power to make you accept whatever the higher up wants you to become. If you can achieve that in someone else, you can control anything about them. You can assure your own preservation exclusive to yourself as far as you want it, as long as you want it. It's in our natural selection instinct, our standard of the most beautiful thing, the beauty of ultimate security, of ultimate power. I know it sounds a little bit too reachy because there's a lot of factors that come into play into where we are right now and into the things that we find appealing in our beauty standards. But I still wanted to point it out. This is something that more than being an absolute truth can serve as a point of consideration when you're pondering of what's even going on today. Uh, and even I have more stuff I want to elaborate on. I could even dispute some of my own points, but overall I find it fascinating how everything is always entangled with stuff you never consider until you suddenly notice it, and then you can never unsee it. Again, as I said, I don't know how much of anything about anything is made by design over generations and generations throughout centuries or even millennia, if that's even possible. You would require an overseeing conscious entangling everything it's very likely that the way we are right now, and the fact that you have people right now having unnatural beauty standards, is just the way things develop always over a certain chain of events. But regardless of that, it's fascinating to study that and just learn how that even happens at all. I don't know. I don't want to overextend this thing too much. This has been me. I don't know what this exactly was, but I am aware I certainly made it. But I am aware I certainly made it. And here it is.